Guys, welcome back to class. Joseph. So if you guys don't remember last class, which you should remember, we talked a lot about this upcoming persuasive assignment that you have due to end this unit. For those who weren't here, I'll go over real quickly with you guys, and then if you want more information, you can come to me after class. So basically, you guys are going to write a 500, 750 word essay. Basically, will you persuade me? And this essay is basically derived of three different elements. First off, you have to observe a correlating theme between the literature and the movie. Okay. Second, you have to discuss certain literary elements such as setting, sequence of events, character development. You have to discuss how these literary elements create this theme, this correlating theme within the two accounts. And then thirdly, you have to come to a total conclusion on how this theme creates an overall meaning to the two accounts, or the story as a whole. Remember, they're the same stories, however, one is a written account, the second is a multimedia account. Okay, and the very important element of this conclusion, this total meaning to the story, is it must correlate to reality. You can't come up with a meaning that is completely far-fetched and doesn't have anything to do with the real world. Okay, so it must come to an overall meaning in that sense. Okay, so like I said, this essay is a persuasive genre. Okay, and basically you have to persuade me of those three elements. So you have to persuade me that the theme that you observed actually exists within the stories. You have to persuade me that these literary elements actually create this theme. You have to actually persuade me that this theme creates a meaning. You have to do much more than just assert, hey, this theme does this theme does that. You have to persuade me that this actually exists. Okay. So why is the skill of persuasion important? Well, first off, it's important because basically every paper that you're going to write as students, it's going to be of a persuasive genre. So you really have to build the skill of persuasive writing if you're going to be successful at writing papers as students. And then secondly, if you're able to write persuasively, you're going to be able to speak persuasively. And you may not realize it, but we attempt to persuade on a daily basis. Right now I'm trying to persuade you the importance of this assignment. Okay, so it's really a very important skill that you must have as students and that you must have really as citizens, and to be able to persuade people of your opinion and your assertions. Okay, you guys have any questions before we move on? No? Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you about the 5 elements of persuasion. Okay, so really the first 2 elements are, I don't want to say the most important, but they start a persuasion. You can't have a persuasive argument without these 2 elements, and that is a thesis statement and a sub-thesis statement. So basically think of it this way: you have a topic and then you have a subtopic, right? But you don't usually have a topic and a single subtopic. You'll have an overall topic and then multiple subtopics. That's essentially what you have with persuasion: a main thesis and then multiple sub-theses. Okay, and basically what an overall thesis statement is it's a conclusion or a judgment. Okay, and this judgment usually has a positive or a negative feeling behind it. If I were to say that you're a good guy, that's a conclusion. It's a judgment. It also has a positive emotion behind it. Okay, so that's also ultimately a very simplified version of a thesis statement. Okay, and it must be arguable. This thesis statement must be arguable. Me saying that you're a good guy, someone can argue that. Joseph can argue that. You know what? I disagree. He's not a good guy for these reasons. All right. It must be arguable. Same with the sub-thesis statements. They must be arguable. Okay. And the sub-thesis must relate to the main thesis. It can't be completely irrelevant to what we're trying to talk about, what we're trying to persuade. Okay. And don't be passive with both your theses. Yes.
Sorry. So if I have a thesis, would my sub-thesis be like evidence to back up that thesis, and then
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
We're going to get to that, okay? And finally, you cannot be passive. When you make both of these, your main thesis and your sub-thesis, be assertive. That's why it's called an assertion. Okay? Don't use words like should. Don't use words like could or maybe. Use assertive words like this does or this will. Be persuasive, be assertive. And a very good thesis statement will usually incorporate a counter-argument. Although, and then you'll state the counter-argument, and then you go on and state your main thesis statement. But I'll give you examples as to how to do this. Very, very simplified versions, okay? Now next, and this goes back to your question about evidence. So when you have your main thesis statement and then you have your sub-thesis statement, you're going to have to give an example. Okay? And so for this paper, you're going to give an example. You're going to give your thesis statement, your sub-thesis statements, and then you're going to pull examples from the literature that relate to what you're trying to persuade. Okay? This validates your assertion. And then after you give this example, you must explain as to how that example relates to the sub-thesis statement. Okay, you must explain that, and then you give the significance as to how that example and that assertion correlates to the main thesis statement. Okay, that's ultimately how you persuade, and that's essentially your conclusion. You're concluding this argument that you're making. Okay, and so like I said, there's 5 elements, right? And I really wanted to write this on the board to give you guys a good visual, but essentially, minus the main thesis, the other 4 elements, so your sub-thesis, your example, your explanation, and your conclusion, that in itself is a paragraph structure. Okay? So your assertion, it's not going to be a single sentence. It can be, but it doesn't have to be a single sentence. Like your example, it can be a single sentence, but it doesn't have to be. And then same with explanation and significance. This is simply a structure as to how your paragraph should basically be the chronological order of the paragraph. Okay, so let's move on here. Let me give you some examples here. I'm going to give you guys a very simplified version just to help you try to get an understanding of how to create your thesis statements and what they should kind of look like. Okay, so I came up with the thesis statement. Although the Chargers have a losing record, okay, first notice how I get a counter argument that can come up. Although the Chargers have a losing record, they are one of the best teams in the NFL. Is that arguable?
Yeah.
Can I argue for that, and can people argue against that?
Yeah.
First step, it must be arguable. So that's my overall thesis. Everything else that follows this is going to go back to this main idea. The Chargers are one of the best teams in the NFL. Okay, now what's next? What would be the next step to this argument?
Sub-thesis?
Sub-thesis or assertion. Now notice how this correlates to the main thesis, but also notice how it's basically the same thing. Okay, so next I'll go. Good teams are able to compete and beat teams that are elite. So notice how that is also another assertion and how that correlates to the main thesis. Okay? Also notice how it's conclusive, it's assertive. Right? Next, example. The Chargers beat the Denver Broncos. That's a simple example. As of right now, people may think, well, okay, so what? That's what the next portion, that explanation. Now I have to explain how that example relates to the sub-thesis or that assertion. Well, the Broncos are considered one of the best teams in the NFL. They have the second best record in the NFL. They're considered by many to have the best defense in the NFL, and yet the Chargers beat them. So now you see how that example relates to the sub-thesis. Now what would be next?
Another sub-thesis?
No,
Your conclusion.
The conclusion, the significance. How is it significant to the main thesis? Well, the Chargers show that they are one of the best teams in the NFL because they are able to beat the best teams in the NFL. So although they have a poor record, they still show themselves to be a very good team by beating good teams. So you guys see how that correlates, how everything really comes together in that chronology. You guys see how that works? So essentially that's what I want you to do in your guys' final paper. Is your thesis statement, your main thesis statement is going to be about theme. It's going to be about the importance of the theme. Okay? And then the discussion portion, all your body paragraphs, are going to be elements within this literature. Use examples from the literature that create this theme. And then conclude how this theme creates an overall meaning to the story. Using this model, using this will allow you to effectively persuade me as the reader. And then using this model in everyday life will allow you to persuade all your friends, persuade anyone just on simple topics. Now don't use this for evil, with great power comes great responsibility, you know what I mean? But it's a great model on how to persuade. Okay? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to let you guys work for about 10 minutes to create a sentence structure. I want you guys to think of a theme. First off, think of a theme. I want you guys to create a thesis statement. And then I want you to just create one paragraph model. Okay, you can use single sentences just for the sake of the assignment. You guys can use this. You guys can use single sentences. This is just my way of assessing you guys to make sure you guys understand the structure. Okay. Do you guys have any questions at all? Yeah.
So earlier, freshman year, when I learned how to write thesis, they had you write it in like a format, like, whatever your, like,
whatever the topic is.
Yeah, like, your topic is, the use of, setting in this play and book, in the movie and in the book, does this because this. Like, do you want us to do a certain format, or as long as we make the assertion and, make the proper assertion and back it up, is that a fine, like, thesis statement?
So that's what I want the body of the paragraph to do.
Okay.
I want your thesis statement to be assertive, to be arguable, to allow your reader to basically come to their own, like, you come to your conclusion, you make this judgment, and I don't want that thesis statement to really have any evidence within it. Okay. I want the body of the paragraph to really have that evidence.
Okay.
So basically, like I said, the thesis statement is a judgment, a conclusion that you're making. So yes, you can say, setting does this to the theme. Setting shows, this element of theme exists. All right, you come to that conclusion, that judgment, and then the rest of the paper is where I want you to explain it and discuss it.
Yeah.
Okay. You have a question too? Was that it? Yeah. Okay. So like I said, guys, get out some paper and then start working on this thesis. If you have any questions, I'll be at my desk.